Brought to you by Ayoko, Africa's leading integrated technology services company. It's time for Tech Talk. In this week's edition, Capitec is making tech moves. The bank wants a bigger slice of the country's fast-growing informal and micro-business sector and is using Stub's accounting software for small and micro businesses to do so. The retail lender signed a deal with the local startup to integrate its accounting software into its banking platform, a cheaper alternative in the accounting software market dominated by the likes of Xero and QuickBooks. Business Day's Mudiwa Gavaza joins us with more insight on Capitec's latest tech move. Mudiwa, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. And maybe let's start with, the synergies. Why does the deal make sense for both Capitec and Stub?
So Stub is a company that's been around since 2023. I had a meeting with one of their co-founders recently, and she is their CEO, Taylor Dandridge. And it was quite an interesting one because they actually set out to build a bank for startups, right? I believe it's about 4 founders. I stand to be corrected, and they all coming from the banking world decided, okay, fine, let's create a bank for startups. But in the process of doing so, they then realized that there was this gap, that existed around lending, or what you call this. Not lending, or rather around the accounting aspect, for small businesses.
Yes.
The information that you need, to get access to certain types of products, all of that stuff. So they then decided to pivot, to get into accounting software, and they decided, okay, fine, let's find an easy way that a person can get a basic, books for their business for a subscription fee.
All right. And considering, how tough and competitive that banking space is, maybe it was, the right move to pivot.
Yeah.
And just from your perspective then, Mudiwa, what, strategic or customer insights do you think drove Capitec to partner with a local fintech player rather than, the more experienced global players? I mean, you just mentioned that Stub has only been around since, 2023?
Yeah. So I think from a Capitec point of view, there's no doubt at this point that Capitec has really done well in what people would consider the lower end of the market. The informal part of the economy and, all of that. We'll cast our eyes back a couple of months just before Kherifuri leaves, Capitec, making the comments about unemployment in the country and, what is formal or informal. And you can see they've got a lot of data that they sit on just around the customers that are in their base. And it's one of the reasons why they've been able to launch so many products so quickly, because they're sitting on this data. So clearly their data has shown them that there is a need for you to be able to have one of the things that they say in the release is that we realize that many of the people in our base are actually running businesses off of their personal bank accounts, right? So that's the insight that Capitec has been able to get. And then from there, you don't need to then go out and then invest in some very complex platform. Why not partner with a local platform that is offering a basic package where you can get, some of those, simple income, expenditure, cash flow, basic balance sheets, invoicing, those types of things that you need. Because when we spoke to Stub, they're doing everything almost up until payroll. That's where it becomes, a bit more, sophisticated, and then you can go on to, some of the bigger platforms. But for a lot of small and informal business owners, that's all you really need, because it's just as a way to get into that habit of actually documenting what's happening. So what happens with this integration is that Capitec allows Stub to then integrate into a Capitec client's bank, banking information.
Okay.
So as you're transacting, that information is almost being fed, into the platform, because you're almost taking the manual processes out of that, so you can get that direct line and that data feed straight, into the Stub platform. So as you're transacting on a business level, the accounting software is doing its thing on this side.
And I mean, you mentioned something quite interesting there, and I find it so fascinating how in tune Capitec is with its customer. Always seems to be a step ahead when it comes to creating, or I guess forming partnerships to sort of introduce such products to its consumer in attempt to, of course, I guess, grow that informal market and help its consumer as well.
One of the more interesting insights that you can see in many in a couple of industries, but more specifically the industries that I primarily look at, you've got your technology, media, telecoms. I specifically look at the telecoms guys, and you draw a line with what's happening with the banking guys. I think the banking guys were probably here a while back, because you get a transaction account, right? You're able to put money into an account, and then the next thing is, okay, fine, maybe you can get yourself a loan, for your home, maybe a car loan. So those are different products that you as a customer are now adding on top of just having a basic account. So you can almost see that a lot of businesses are moving to that place where what you're after is to say, okay, we've got a customer. How many things can we offer to this one customer, as opposed to doing one or two things really well, for our customers? So in this particular case, for Capitec, this works well because it's yet another layer of value that they then add to the small business owners, that would typically either not even think about. This was an interesting insight that came from the CEO of Stub. They said that they have 3 buckets of business owners that they engage with, right? People that don't know that they need, accounting software.
Yeah.
Those that don't know what accounting software is, and I think they said the last one is how, you can do this. So that's the value that you're adding. Last piece I would just throw in there. For me, when I zoom out, I also see Capitec almost closing a gap, because a few years ago they bought Mercantile Bank, right? And that was them sort of entering that business and commercial banking space. And obviously you're more on the you're calling them small to medium enterprises and above, but you also have this gap here.
That micro business.
Yes, those micro businesses. So I think you almost see a move where they're trying by all means to also be catering, to that micro segment. And so that over time, they will be having business banking of some sort across the board.
And what does this partnership tell you about where South Africa's fintech ecosystem is heading, right? Especially in terms of deal-making activity and what some of the big banks are doing. I mean, recently as well, Nedbank acquired iKhokha. Yes, totally different businesses, but also in a push to, solve those issues that are impacting the small business owner.
So interestingly, Stub, one of the first integrations that they did was actually with iKhokha. So there is an ecosystem that's at play, because what Stub has really been good at is realizing that if we're going to go after these small and micro businesses, it's good to partner with people that have, bases already. Stub is currently serving around 4,000 businesses at the moment, and they're looking to grow and scale, even further beyond that. That's one aspect. Second aspect is there's been this, I don't know if you can call it attention. We always ask banks, do you see the fintech guys as enemies
Coming
friends.
to eat your lunch.
Coming to eat your lunch. But the fintechs are usually very good at doing one thing and one thing very well. In this particular case, Stub is a fintech company. They're really good at, having a simple software package for accounting for small businesses, right? That now becomes an area of business that Capitec doesn't need to bother themselves with, and you just, partner. What we wait to see is what is the future of a Stub. Does Stub continue being an independent company, or down the line do they end up being, let's say, swallowed up by a bigger bank? Because you can imagine that the Capitec integration would be one integration that they want to do. It would make sense for them to do similar integrations with Nedbank and Absa, Standard Bank, FNB, so that they, really close the loop. But if Capitec decides, okay, you know what, this is making sense, let's just, bring this, as we saw a couple of years ago when instead of coming up with their own scan to pay, Standard Bank just went and acquired SnapScan.
Yes.
Right. So you have all of those elements, coming in where instead of us going out and starting something new, let's just partner, with some of these guys. And I think from an ecosystem point of view, it really does, firm them up. And if you're sitting on as much data as Capitec is, you're also doing the maths of, is it worth it for us to put our own money down?
Yeah.
Or can we do a test case with our partner and see, what this thing can actually, do for us?
All right, let's leave it there, Mudiwa. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. That was Business Days, Mudiwa Gavaza, with this week's edition of Tech Talk. Brought to you by Ayoko, Africa's leading integrated technology services company.